Hi, everyone. I'm Graeme Richardson-Locke, FESPA's technical manager. Welcome to the 7th in our series of FESPA Coffee Breaks. Any of you that have joined us before will know that I'm FESPA's technical manager. However, if this is the first time you've joined, I'd just like to let you know that I've spent the last 35 years working in screen and large format digital printing. I joined the industry as a trainee screen printer, and my passion for print has taken me through roles in management and directorships in point of sale, textiles and military electronics before I joined FESPA in my current role. I'm a great believer in the value of peer-to-peer networking and know that my knowledge has been greatly enhanced by attending the events and seminars that have been supported by FESPA. As an international specialty print trade federation, FESPA continues to focus its efforts on knowledge sharing and community building within the screen and wide format digital print landscape. Since FESPA's foundation almost 6 decades ago, its purpose has been to help businesses using screen and digital printing to advance and make the best of the latest technology. We aim to keep today's session to about 45 minutes, as we understand your time is limited as you deal with many issues on a daily basis. We hope that you'll benefit from your participation and that you'll find some useful tips to build on that will support you in a disruptive and challenging marketplace. As we consider today's session, we're fortunate to be joined by Max Hansen from Nordwerk, who has made an extraordinary sacrifice in getting up to join us at 3 a.m. in Vancouver. So thank you so much, Max.
It's my pleasure.
We're also joined by Einar from Reball, the well-known manufacturer of rigid paperboard products. Einar is joining us, I think, from Norway. So we have a true international gathering today. They both bring valuable insight and experience in how to create sustainable products for interiors and display environments. I'm now going to share with you today's topic slide with the questions. So in today's coffee break, we're going to look at sustainability, why Nordwerk partnered with Reball to build paper-based furniture and large scale displays. Let's discover the awesome potential of FSC sustainable paperboard. These sustainable materials can be used in large scale projects, bringing their distinctive aesthetic and creative potential to life. Here we'll look at how this partnership has flourished. I'm now going to share our panelist slide with you. This will also be reshared at the end of today's session so that you'll have our contact details for reaching out to us. So I'm very pleased to welcome both Max Hansen, CEO of Nordwerk, and Einar, Reball's Director of Business Development. Gentlemen, if you can please introduce yourselves so that we can understand a bit more about your background and current roles. And I think, Einar, if you go first, because I think Max is going to show us a couple of images to inspire us in his work.
Thank you, Graeme, and thanks for inviting us in. Yeah, no, quickly about me. I worked many years as globally with packaging and visual communication, graphic arts. And then I moved to Reball in 2019 to work with sales and marketing and business development. And yeah, well, shortly said, I knew Reball very well from before and definitely aligned with their values. So to me, that was an easy choice when I got the opportunity. And also, I think, to be honest, that it's the right timing now to gear up Reball and show what paper can do.
Perfect. Thank you. So Max, from your 3 a.m. in the morning location, maybe you can tell us a bit about your background and how you came to join us.
Absolutely. My name is Max. I'm the CEO of Nordwork, and I am talking to you from Canada, but I was actually born in Germany and I moved over to Canada a couple of years back. And I'm an engineer, even though I'm working in the fields of design today. And instead of talking about myself, I'm just going to show you what I'm actually doing. And I'm very proud of myself for being able to do the screen sharing. Because so these are the products that or these are the designs that we actually make. So we have a strong focus on paper-based designs, especially on large-scale designs, but also smaller furniture, as you can see on the right. And yeah, that's basically what we do, and that's why I like to say that I'm an engineer, not a designer, because that's how I look at things, always from an engineering perspective. Maybe stop share. Here we are. Maybe just a last quick thing. Before I did what I do today, I was working as an engineer for an engineer's office that did projects for UNESCO, and then I've been teaching construction for a while at University of Technology in Dresden. And today I'm here talking to you, 3 o'clock in the morning. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, well, so you've got a sense of who we are now. We're going to just put up a quick poll so that we can get an idea of who you are. So if you please take a minute just to let us know which category of printers you fit within, so that we can get a better idea. That's really helpful. Okay, so the poll is going. Always interests me the mix of printing businesses that join these sessions. We have some, of course, digital printers in abundance, and mainly wide format, but signage, interiors, but even some textile and garment decorators. So I think it just pays testimony to the breadth of capabilities that these printing processes that we're involved with have. So that's great. Thank you, everyone. So we have, yeah, largely speaking, guys, so you're aware, wide format digital is our main cohort. Then it's kind of signage, but we also have signage, interiors, and a smattering of industrial and garment, sort of on the edges of this particular topic. Okay, thank you, everyone. Right, so before we get into the questions, sorry, we've done the poll. So I think what I meant to say is, without further delay, let's go to our first question, which would be more appropriate. What motivated you to develop paperboard furniture and architectural large-scale installations with Reball? So Max, you're clearly the right person for this one.
Well, there are two sides to the answer. Well, one side, of course, is the second you decide to do something the way we do it and build things like that, you need an excellent material. So that's of course a thing that is inevitable, especially when you have clients like Volvo or Mercedes-Benz or Adobe. You really need the best material. The Germans have a saying: if you decide to build cheaply, you'll most likely build twice. And that is something I cannot worry about. I cannot worry about problems with the material on site or during the planning process. So that's one clear side to it. The other side that actually fascinated me about the approach that Reball had was the fact that they actually put the artist in the center. For us, companies like mine, it's not enough to actually be good at what we're doing. We also have to learn to be like marketeers and move in the digital realm and kind of promote ourselves. And if there's a company like Reball that actually helps us promoting the work, not just me, but also other companies, that's incredibly valuable. And it also makes me feel, that's a very personal opinion now, but it makes me feel valued, not only from the perspective of our clients, but also from the perspective of our suppliers. And that's why I'm happy to work with Reball.
Thank you, Mike. Can I jump in there, Graeme?
Yeah, please do.
That was such a nice description. I had to say something about that. Yeah, thanks, Max. And yeah, but just let me put this in a frame. So to Reball, this is very normal. To put the designer in the spotlight makes sense for Reball. It's always been like that. Remember, 15 years ago, when the train left the station the first time, there was a range of early adopters which took on board Reball, and they started with a handful of designs, and today they create wonderful things. They really shown open eyes and show new borders all the time. And I think that when we talk about designers in this perspective, we should include, I mean, that's everything. That's architects. As Max said, he's an engineer with a mathematics on top, so that makes him very interesting for pushing paper further on. And he blends very finely into them a whole bunch of different designers, from structural design, architects, carpenter, interior designers, engineers, entrepreneurs. You know, people use Reball in different areas, and that support us to show what paper can do, to understand it ourselves. And I think really to us now, Max represents something new now to us. It's a new dimension of what paper can do again. It's a good represents obviously for how far we can push paper. But I also find these Max design refreshing, you know, refreshing in our community, and also it's very paper.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. So the second question I have today is really about what have been the key challenges in developing Reball paperboard products, because of course it's many of the things that you're making maybe traditionally would have been made of wood, metal, plastics and other things. So there must have been some considerable learning attached to this. So Max, again, perhaps you can start us on this part of your experience.
Well, I am not in the business of developing paper, so I actually have to hand that question over to Einar, because he's part of the world that actually produces. I am just the one who's converting it.
True enough.
Right, there you go. No, I'm happy to take that on, Max. Yeah, so no, but thanks for asking, and you actually pointing at it, Graeme, because it's really about that. You know, it's about becoming a real alternative to what is there, and try to perform as good, or you know, in different ways. We have material properties, but that is really one of those things that has been a challenge, obviously. Let's look at two headlines then. So one is the technical part, which is basically make it a real alternative. That means you got to find the right mix of fibers. It means that you're going to find a good construction that can really make a construction material. It needs to produce well, it needs to be light, it needs to be solid, it needs to print well and cut well, and crisp finishing for sure. So it's not easy to make a product like that, but that was made excellently back then. That is just something that we take for granted today, that the quality is there, thanks to the brilliant engineering which was put into it in the first place. And then the other big thing and the other difficulty that I find as a market strategist is basically to position it right. And it's really about to tell what paper is, more than just something that you draw on. It's really to talk about the material properties, I think, and put that into perspective. Again, where does paper products fit into this world in the different markets, and where does the other material fit in? It's really about the balance, I believe, in the future, and that balance is optimized on a product's abilities, and I think that is what our role is today, to position paper next to, replacing and working with a whole range of other materials, really.
And I think it does represent such a great alternative, doesn't it, to conventional materials, plastics and other things. I think when it strikes me that now considerations to do with load, the dimensional strength for load carrying, for structural engineering offers a whole lot of other considerations. And I think that I suppose across your range of products you have different characteristics to suit different end uses. So where the thickness is, the choice of material is critical to the end product selection, right?
Absolutely, and looking at it, it's really about also to find out the properties in use, because I've seen Reball installations carrying beautiful products in gas stations in Scandinavia in winter time, right? Yes. So here's the difference between 2 weeks lifetime and 3 months lifetime is that you lift it a little bit, as an example. And that's the thing. I mean, paper can't replace everything. Paper can't do everything, but paper can do a whole much more than what it does today. the fact with paper is that we have it everywhere. We just don't see it. It's inside our furniture, it's in our doors, it's used in cars. It's an excellent material to fasten other materials. So also moving into industrial applications, for sure, paper is very present. It's just that you don't touch it and see it every day. It has a usage, a little hidden usage.
I mean, it's a great point. I think that when you look at furniture, many furniture brands making, kind of chipboard cord materials for wardrobes and furniture products, most of them have actually printed foils laminated to them. They're not actually wood in most cases, certainly at the budget end. So it's true.
It's actually an interesting thing, because when you think about it, paper, in the late 90s, there was a superhero movie, and there was one superhero who could become invisible, but only if no one was watching. And that's kind of like, use the superpower if you think about it. But it's kind of like the same thing with paper. It's everywhere. It's in so many things, and people don't see it on a daily basis. But then the perception is so different. People have that weird perception, like it's a weak material, but everybody has paper products at home, and many times you don't even know you have them, because, as Einar said, it is indoors, it is in cars, it is even in airplanes. It is basically everywhere. It surrounds us, and it actually supports a lot of structures. So it's a wonderful hidden material. I just wanted to point that out.
No, it's good. It's good. Okay, let's move on to our next question, which is really around the CAD area. So the CAD design skills required to produce your products go beyond the creation of simple point of purchase displays into really quite elaborate engineering. What have you learned about the limits of paperboard? Max, I think this is yours.
Well, when you look at the material, you always have to have a look at how the material behaves. What are the characteristics of the material? When you take a piece of wood, for example, there are people who cannot make a small chair out of a piece of wood. That thing will collapse. And then there are people who can make the structure very thin and very elegant and produce a beautiful product. And that is, I believe, true for every material, regardless of what you're using. So it's the same for paper. What you need to know is, how does the material behave, under which circumstances? And what I have learned is that there's no need for any kind of fear working with paper. In fact, actually, paper has a few abilities, especially when it comes to the relationship between strength and its weight, that you actually can do a few things with it that you can't do with other materials, especially when you look at the larger installations that we made. The biggest one we ever done, that was a self-supporting dome structure covering 198 square meters. If you would build something like that out of wood, you would need a very elaborate supporting structure, while when you use paper, you basically can use very simple things to support the structure while building it. And so there's so many advantages to it when you build things like we do, that that I have actually learned that it's a wonderful material where you almost have no limitations. Of course, there are things that you can't do with paper, but there are so many things you can't do with concrete. There's so many things you can't do with bricks. And we don't actually ask the question. I know with paper, we're not there yet. We're not at the point where the perception of the material is so good that we don't have to talk about that. So we have to have these conversations. But from my perspective and from my experience, this is a material that's totally equal next to other building materials. And I don't see any real limitations, to be honest.
And certainly looking at the photos you showed at the beginning of this session, I can imagine you doing a structure for the lobby of a corporate office environment, where something, with these amazing flowing organic lines that actually is sculptural, aesthetically sophisticated, durable, and actually is something to be celebrated far more. I think for many printers, I think the perception is that this is a temporary all good things, but a temporary lightweight material that you use for making a cardboard desk for an exhibition stand, and that that it doesn't extend beyond that. But I think what we're seeing from your experience actually is that the CAD design skills are critical I think having that kind of, your skills as an engineer, if you want to process this material to its most satisfactory performance, you need to really get amongst the CAD design for production.
Absolutely. And the good thing is there's so many good tools out there today. Like back in the day, when you think of the early works of, for example, Zaha Hadid, who was an amazing architect, the software was insanely expensive back then. Today, you have all these tools, and the only thing that we need to do in the world of cardboard is we need to apply engineering knowledge and engineering skills to the material. And once you start doing that, you'll see it's actually not that different from any other materials. And I like to describe the process, especially in terms of software and CAD, as a democratization of engineering, because of these things are available, it actually makes it kind of easy. And today, at the beginning, I was just wondering, how can I build larger structures? And of course, the moment you figured that out, you ask yourself the question, okay, how can I make these structures actually being very beautiful? And that's actually where it comes down to. It comes down to good design, not just showing the performance of a material, but actually how to transform that into something that amazes people.
Sure. Yeah, great point. I'm going to move on to the next question, because regrettably we're always against the clock, which is frustrating, but that's the world we live in. So your creations are visually eco-friendly, but are they? And what is an environmentally friendly material? Now, I know both of you will have something to say about this, but I think you're going to come in first.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's a very good question, Graeme. It's the question, I guess. And I would answer that with another question. I would ask: is it really an environmental friendly material? Can we make an environmental friendly material? Because if you think about it, it's to make a material, you need some raw materials in some shape or form. And once you take raw material out to make another material, you have impacted something. And here starts the question: is that environmental friendly? So it's a nice philosophical discussion, this one, which is highly important and very relevant for all aspects of our society today, also in our businesses. And that's why this needs to be talked about. And I think what is important is to think, because this is not only business, this is the daily life. This is like what the globe is all about these days, at least the world as we know it. Talking from Europe specifically here now, but it's more than just a CO2 footprint. It's more than, let's say, just plastic, not just plastic, but it's more than ocean plastic and plastic, microplastic going into the earth. It's more than raw material consummation and limited resources and all that. It's complex. It's the overall the overall environmental footprint that we leave, and I think this is about knowledge. And I think even though it's a complex question that we can't avoid, we can't really get around that. We need to see the whole. And the good news is that that's a very interesting voyage as well, to understand the raw materials, to understand how it works, how we actually explore it, what we do with it, how much it is. And to me, this becomes a complete life cycle where you really look at the great overview. The other part of that is to understand it, because we actually just started the voyage. In materials as such, we have a lot of information available to us, but we need to take it seriously. We need to dive down and figure out what is our materials environmental footprints all over during its entire voyage. And now what we do now, it's basically to look at how a material perform more like in a circular economy perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think that the choice of raw material and its reprocessability, we have to think more about low impact. So maybe that's a way of looking at it. Rather than no impact, we're talking about reduced impact. We're talking about,
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. Max, I know you want to come in on this one.
So here's the thing. When I moved over to North America, all of a sudden my diet changed because of the food that's very different over here. So living in Europe means you talk to someone about cheese, and you basically ask the question: is it going to be Dutch cheese, or is it French, or is it Swiss cheese? When you come over here, you all of a sudden have to talk about growth hormones and stuff like that, and that's where the entire conversation goes with certain things. It leads away from the actual thing, and with paper. And with the aspect of environmentally friendliness, to me, I was born in '81. For my generation, that is not a question. Of course, we're using materials which are environmentally friendly. And I would never argue about that, because if somebody would come up to me and say, you know what, we want something, we want to use plastic, and we want to use, all these bad things. I'm not saying plastic is a bad thing. There are a lot of good reasons for plastic, but there are also a lot of fields where we can actually substitute it. Use something else, and that's something we always need to strive for, no matter what. And I agree with Einar. It's a good question how environmentally friendly certain materials are, because you have to look at the overall process. You have to look from the beginning to end. We have a tendency today to only look at that part of the economy that we are working in, but of course everything needs to be produced and it needs to be recycled at the end. So I'm always in for voting for the aspect, looking at things from the perspective of the circular economy, and from that perspective, paper is an excellent material. And then of course and that's the cheese question, then we need to start talking about in which country, how well do they actually recycle things, how does their circular economy work, and these are all questions that need to be debated on national and local levels. But to use an environmentally friendly material, meaning a material that can be recycled, that is absolutely no question to me.
Sure. Think about it this way. This is Max talking now, showing the borders, so pushing the borders of what paper can do. Think about the designer in the large perspective. We talked about that. The designer is more than just a design profession. Of course, that's very important. It's used everywhere. Paper is a broad material, but seeing it from that perspective, it's important to follow up on, what is environmental friendliness in terms of one application. So you have a given application today, you try to optimize it logistically, beauty, design-wise for its use. We believe that in the future, the great designers and design environments will have knowledge-based decisions done based on more understanding, which we need to communicate. So here's the thing, I believe that an application in the future could be 5 different materials, using each of their material properties right, to create something that is great for what it's made for. And just that, not overkill, not too much. So basically moving looking at it a little bit different and saying, rather than saying what material can I use, for my structure, we should ask what materials should I use? And by that, when we learn how to balance this over time, we will have more fit structures and a lot less footprint for sure.
Yeah, and I think when you consider the reduce, reuse, recycle approach towards sustainable manufacturing, then of course reduce, if you're making an inappropriate product from a poor quality material that isn't strong enough for the application, then of course it's shortening its life, and it doesn't address that question. I think you're absolutely right. I think it is all about an intelligent choice of materials for the right application. I do think there's in terms of value, creation of value, if you are using materials, any large PLC that, and Max, feel free to tell me if you think I'm incorrect, but large PLCs are all responsible for carbon reporting, have been for many years. They've all got roadmaps to net zero. And anyone that works in the supply chain for those businesses, if they can demonstrate products that are made with a lower environmental cost and lower carbon production, then they are going to find favor with those people, because it's the scope 3 emissions that are the ones that are contributing a huge amount within the supply chain of those PLCs. So I think it's, in a way, we can get ahead of the game a bit here, and instead of waiting for clients to come back to us and say, to demand from us environmentally responsible materials. As I see there's a business opportunity to push this forward. However, that is of course balanced by the fact that there is a cost consideration, and I hear lots of printers in my ear saying, yeah, try selling that to my customers. I get it, and I know that that's a challenge, but I think if we take the challenge, market it right, and Max, you know, hats off to you for your persistence and your efforts to really make this work. I think you're a really great example of a business that has picked the ball up and run with it, as they say. I'm going to move on. Sorry, I'm going to move on to our next question, which actually fits kind of nicely with that crossover, which is about carbon footprinting. And I know that this is always a controversial question, so I look forward to the difference in views that we have here. So the question is, are you able to calculate the carbon footprint of your production and pass that on to your client as part of the sales process? Max, I think you first on this one.
There's so much there in that question. Here's the thing. I mean, you touched the field of costs and manufacturers and converters and designers who actually have that problem that we always need to be cost effective. You know, we have to keep the lights running in the company. People need to be paid. Rent need to be paid. So first of all, for me personally, I do not pass the fact that something is green. I do not pass that on to the client just because I can't. There are cases where this is possible, but I'm not even going there because that's not the discussion I want to have with the client. We are a design company and we focus on design. I'm in the business of selling good design. I'm not in the business of selling certificates or doing greenwashing or giving people a good feeling. I do give them a good feeling, at least I hope so, but
it's baked in, right? That's what you're saying, is that it's just baked into the business. It's not.
So today, right, absolutely. So today it's possible to calculate the carbon footprint, and we sometimes do that, especially when you look, for example, at the Volvo example that I've shown. Yes, that was a big deal for Volvo to actually have some numbers around that. We do these things, but at the end of the day, for a company to stay competitive on the market, we always need to be able to offer good prices. And we can do that. So we can do calculations where we actually show the client we can load more in a semi-truck because the material is more lightweight. We can save time on site installing it. We need less people. So there's a lot of ways to actually do a lot of calculations around the whole thing and make it attractive for the client and be absolutely honest about it. But the aspect that something is green, that's something that I know it needs to sink into people's mind. I cannot go and be arrogant about it and tell people, well, if you want to destroy the planet, then you should go on and use whatever. That's not how I feel about it. We need to lead and we need to show good examples. And there are a lot of great companies out there, especially when you look at cardboard furniture, who do wonderful things. And that's the most important thing. It's these great companies doing good work, leveling up the perception of the material. The more people love cardboard, or not just say love cardboard, but the more people see what paper can do, the more natural it will be. And then we can lead from the top, you know, and make cardboard something it actually already is, but make it an alternative that is fully recyclable, that is easy to use, that is available, and go from there. That's how I feel about it. We just need to lead by example.
We have seen Graeme, a lot of reboard being positioned in what we call the reboard spot, right, where you have there isn't really a good an alternative. Now I'm talking, you know, reboard finding its way. So that would be the typical reboard application where you start, you know, adding a POS in a store with some weight on for a certain durability. When you make yourself a window in which you want to mount quickly, you know, and solid, without glue, without tapes, and pretty much just bring it back flat pack to reuse it next Christmas or next event, or, you know. So you got to add those. You got to look at the overall perspective. You know, then the cost of paper, which is higher than the cost of an oil product, is competitive still. However, I think that, you know, the green trends that we see, the green wave that we see now coming in, and we can feel that very clearly from a paper manufacturer perspective. That wave also will support us to balance out this a little bit. We hope, but we believe that, you know, for us it's about looking at the core, where we actually compete as a material, regardless of the trends, and move from there. And that is what these people are showing us. Everything that is made was made for a compatible reason. I mean, they talk to just the same brand owners and converters, you know, fight the same budgets in paper as everything else. They normally have a lot of different materials that they can choose, and there is a reason every time they choose the Reball. So I think that we have a nice position there in the middle, and now we need to break out, make smarter things, better designs all the way, push those limits so that, you know, a paper product becomes that exact thing as we want it to be, enhancing all the qualities and advantages that paper can give you.
But that's a good point you got right there. So when you look at the processes, how things actually evolve today, how things are made, paper is a material that's pretty easy to handle. And there's a lot of companies out there, printing companies, who do have the machines, you know, the Kongsberg tables, the Zund tables, whatever, who actually can cut it. And I think that a lot of companies out there do not realize that they actually have the abilities in-house to work with paper. Every graphic designer who's using the Adobe Illustrator, which I mention here because I believe that's the standard in the industry. I use CAD. I'm not an Illustrator guy, but the Illustrator has built-in functions that actually can produce data that can be interpreted by these cutting machines, meaning that actually a lot of companies could build a lot of things in-house, or at least plan it in-house, and save a lot of time. And think about it, you know, creating jobs and making things smooth is also a part of sustainability, social sustainability. And what we can see today is that we can smoothen out certain processes. We don't need to involve a lot of people in the process of making something. We can actually have things produced in-house in companies. I don't want to advertise that too much because, you know, I want to keep the lights on too. Yeah. But it is true. If you have a graphics department, why would you use an external company when you actually have these capabilities to build something in-house, especially since prototyping with paper is insanely easy? I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, well, and this Graeme is stuff that you guys would know better than me. I can only smile, but yeah, no, but and also challenges. Of course, there are challenges, and as you said, Max, you gotta know the material, whichever material that is, and also its limitations, especially in regards to use case. You know, the wet floor example. So that is important, and then if you look at the environmental aspect of this, and you go back to the source, you will also find some very interesting things about paper, and that's very important, because the communication here is really what matters. You know, the communication about how to, obviously, what it is, the different aspects of material, and generally. And for paper, that voyage starts in the forest, and that's also a very interesting voyage. I'm not going to start that whole thing now, and I'm not the most competent man to do that anyhow. But it's interesting to see how you can, over time, measure a raw material in depth, learn how to manage it in a sustainable way, and make that the rule. And that is actually what the Nordic forestry is about. And that is, you know, an addition to this whole aspect, which I think is important to bring into this conversation.
And I think there's something, just to close on this, because we need to get to some Q&As. The fact that we're moving towards a future where there's a high likelihood of increased legislation on waste regulations, on airborne aquatic pollution. You know, when you look at fiber-based materials, they generally have a shorter supply chain, a less complex supply chain in terms of, you know, they're not part of the whole petrochemical processing industry. I think the performance with fiber-based products made for applications well offer so many interesting strengths. And, you know, I think we would be mistaken to think that in most jurisdictions, legislation will not be following up over the next few years. I think it's better to get ahead of the game than it is to have to meet demands late in the game, because I'm sure, Max, you would probably attest to the fact that the learning that you have to do on the way is the thing that when the obligations start hitting you, you're actually in a better position to respond to them. So,
right.
Gents, I'm gonna
let me just add one more thing that I totally forgot in the entire. Also, one thing that is very unique to paper is in the way it can be folded and used. That's especially true for us. Most of the things we build without glue or screws. And that comes because of the characteristics of the material. It's hard to make a V-notch or a V-cut into a piece of wood, let alone into concrete or whatever. But that's possible with paper. So there's a lot of things around you can actually save. And whoever found himself in the spot to buy 1,000 screws knows that can be a cost factor at times.
No, it's a good point. Again,
we talk about the big ones, of course, not the small ones.
Yeah, simplification.
Sorry.
Okay, gents, let's move on and see. We've got some questions here today. So I'm just gonna dive in and go for any that come up. We've got Mohammed Jogi here is asking if Reball would have a presence in Africa, particularly South Africa. So Einar, perhaps you can, do you have distribution in South Africa now?
No, we don't. So Reball, we are available in about 30 countries, and we can of course ship worldwide. So not a problem to reach. So this is again back to the environmental question, and it's about the logistical question. So you got the both. One part is the shipment costs that we need to consider, and specifically someone from South Africa will have to consider, because if it would make sense to send paper so far and over the wet borderlines, I think no problem, we do that. But it's going to take time, and it's going to be a cost added to it. So you gotta weigh that carefully. But that is of course possible. So the difficulty not having a distributor in place in for instance South Africa is basically the fact that then you need to import a lot of material to make it make sense. So that's why you would use the distribution point, which could then split up the container. So it's very possible to get a Reball to South Africa for sure, but I don't know if it's smart. You know, we will see when the container price goes down and what happens in the market. When that being said, there are also, talking about paper, there is other paper products out there, and definitely also in South Africa. So to get hold of paper and do beautiful things should not be a problem.
Okay, cool. Thank you. There's also the same question to you, Max, whether you have the opportunity to ship and work commercially in Africa and South Africa.
Oh, for us, it's pretty simple. Our process is highly digital, meaning we could, with a good partner and in a different country, we ship the data digitally. So we just send it over, right? It's the entire process, the entire planning process is highly digitalized. When it comes to installation, of course, and something reaches a certain size, we need to send a supervisor. We did that in the past with projects. That's also how I got to North America in the first place. I came here as a supervisor for a project, and so that is doable. But you have to take that into consideration. That you need a good man on site if it reaches a certain level, unless you actually work with a company that has these abilities, and then you could basically teach them online. But that's always depending on whether these people in their company are willing to take the risk to go into an endeavor, and it's also highly depending on the size of the installation.
Okay, thank you. So here's, I think this is an interesting question from Stephen Forder. Can you see a future for selling paper-based furniture in a home retail environment? I think that's a great question. Max, I'd like your because I know you've made desks and you've used
Right.
Reball as a component part as well as being the entire material for seating and desks. What's your view on it becoming a home decor product?
Well, I can see that. The challenge is that the furniture market is a highly competitive market. When you look at the price structure, certain furniture that is offered to customers, it is hard to compete with that if you are at the size like we are. Well, we're a small company, and we cannot produce things the same way IKEA can, for example. And of course, our prices are higher, and then we have to overcome that invisible limitation, quote unquote, that we actually using paper. So I absolutely think it's possible. We partly did it in the past, but we need a better perception of the material in general, so that people say, I actually want that. And one good example, I once read that is the wiggle chair that Frank Gehry made in the 70s. Somebody once wrote about that chair that was pretty cheap back in the day, that today costs around $700 US. People put that in their homes who would never sit on that. They would put it in there as an object,
Sculpture,
and as a sculpture, right? And we need to get away from that and actually look at the material as something that is it's an everyday material. I think that's something for the future.
Yeah,
I don't think we're there yet.
No, it's. I would like to comment on that, because we see Reball more and more in homes. So that thing already exists, but not not to the limit of normal furniture, and for the reason that Max just mentioned, of course. But you see a lot now, and more as shelf systems. You see them as TV shelves, coffee tables. You see that, and and you see it's fun too, because it's so creative. So if you want to put the paper in your house, you can basically design it yourself and get exactly what you want, and then you can print on it. But when that's said, Max, I think you're all right, and you'll get the word. But I think what you said is just right. It's to learn the material and how to use it, where to use it. That's the challenge we're working with all the time, right?
sure.
Imagine a future where we have these points where we actually can produce things ourselves. Like every person could do that. You plan it yourself. You use open source software, and then you go to that shop around the corner and you have it produced there, and then you have that complete unique experience for your home. That's absolutely thinkable, and it's absolutely wonderful. I'd love that.
And in a way, that's the kind of that sort of science future has been thrown out there in terms of a vision for 3D printing on a large scale, hasn't it? But this is like this is 3D making, but with a very sustainable raw material. So it's
right.
An interesting point. I think you're right that localization in manufacturing is clearly something that makes a great deal of sense in reducing carbon footprint. Is just a question of balancing. There's this point at which we say, if we were talking about clothing and you were saying, oh, I buy my, I have my nice Nike t-shirt that came out of Myanmar, and, it came out of a plant that manufactures hundreds and hundreds of thousands of t-shirts a week. How you can possibly get to that kind of price point by reshoring and localization, I just don't see that it's economically possible. So it's really about the consumer making a different decision about the value of what they're buying, where from, and how transparent the supply chain is, isn't it? These are the things that I think we will in time be wrestling with a bit more. I'm going to move on to, so a couple of people have asked about flame retardancy, which, is a good point to make. I would imagine, Einar, that this is a post-manufacturing spray finish application. If you want to have fire retardancy, that you have to post-treat the product. Is that correct?
That's possible. So you can use liquid and enhance that quality after you built. There is also available, let's say, fire retardant product ranges. So you would have that as a material as well, in which you can build. For Reball, it's Euro Class C, But the point here is that that's another very complex area. Obviously, you get a request from where you're going to build, which is your indication. But now it's a question about, is this a short-term object? Is an installation a permanent installation or not? And you'll have different rules there. So this is an area in which people need to be careful. And then, of course, the designers would know the basics about this. But in principle, you can use Reball to build Euroclass C installation, no problem. And if you look at the actual fire tests and you see what happens in there, you see that it's also very consistent against dripping. It's about smoking and dripping as well as just, being at fire. So there is a lot of aspects to the classification, and it performs very well. So yeah, it's possible.
All you need to do is you need to know the regulations of the venue. In some places it's nationwide. Germany, for example, there's one classification nationwide. In Canada, for example, you have the venue decides what exactly they want. Usually it's NFPA. NFPA 7, but you can treat the material, and that is, it takes a little work, and it's the same thing like building with the material. You also have to know what you're actually doing, but it is very possible. And the good thing is there are actually liquids on the market that do not have any negative impact on the recyclability of the material. So it's a problem that's actually been, I don't want to say it's been solved, because it's still a bit of a process to go through the entire flame retardants thing, but it is absolutely doable today.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just looking at the feed here. We have so many questions, and I'm afraid we're not going to be able to get to all of them. So I thank all of you for putting your questions in the feed. When we get to the end of the session, we're going to share both Max and Einar's email addresses with you. I'd like to suggest that you direct your emails to them afterwards. I'm going to take one more. So maybe I'll do a slightly longer one and then a slightly quicker one. So Peter van der Veer is asking Einar for, he's saying that they're developing a display for all their wrapping colors, about 90 colors. They've chosen Reball as a material because they have sustainability as a priority in their strategy. We would be the third foil producer with a color display, but the first one with the cardboard one. Is there a platform for Reball to share those realizations? So that's interesting, because I know that you have an inspiration gallery coming up. So actually, that's a great one for you to answer. And he's from Graphitip self-adhesive product. So maybe you can give us your quick version, please, of.
Oh yeah, I only have quick versions, well, not always. Yeah, no, I will, Graeme. Thank you for asking the question, and thank you for choosing Reball. Obviously, what can I say? What a compliment. So yes, we are building a digital platform. It just launched. It starts with what we call an MVP, a minimum viable product, in order to start changing as a company. So we're moving, not really the big stones here, but we're continuing the essence of Reball, which is putting the designer in the spotlight and working for the environment. So those two aspects needs to be communicated well. So for the inspiration part, we are building. We already started, and there is quite a few nice illustrations in there, but we are building a gallery, so to ensure that the world can see what paper can do. And then we are also building, in the continuation of this, a platform in which we will support startup companies with these kind of things, including design files. We have some free designs today in a library. We're now taking those, at least few of those, out of the library, and we put it into the world of Reball, which is going to be tomorrow's training platform for startups and others. So yes, we're getting there, but we're not there yet. We will, of course, be able to support if you ask us on a mail, of course.
I'm going to take one final question, and again, apologies. There are just so many here. But Cornelia Silva, you're the lucky person that managed to get my attention. So so Cornelia is asking, I think, about the complexity in the recycling processes. So when products have been printed or wrapped, lacquered, customized, and so on. Now, I think I'm going to jump in first on this one to say that I once did a large exhibition project for Puma, and we were selected because we used Reball material. We printed with UV digital onto that material. We had to go through a whole load of environmental auditing with the design agency and a third-party audit, because Puma were so committed to sustainable practice.
Great.
And we found that in comparison to other processes, the board with UV ink was actually a very suitable choice. However, not one without problems. There are issues still with de-inking, and it might be that in some of our previous discussions, we've talked about materials that can be upcycled, so they can end up, instead of being made into kind of dirty products like pallets or black plastic buckets or whatever, they can actually go back to being pure materials again through the recycling processes that are available. I think we're a way off that, and my view is that if you've wrapped Reboard in vinyl, you're going to have to strip the vinyl off before you can get to a recyclable purpose. But maybe a quick perspective would be great from both of you on this final question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in general, you can say that so it's two things. It's fresh and so virgin and recycled fibers. That's one part of the question I find, and the other one is what happens when you add plastic to it. And of course, the first one is kind of easy. You would not have recycled materials without fresh fiber, and you wouldn't have the great benefit of recycling fresh fibers. You wouldn't have recycling. So these two things are totally depending on each other. Reboard recycles as all virgin fiber between 5 and 7 times if you only recycle the fresh fiber. But now this blends into a recycling mix, and the output depends on what's there from before. So if you throw Reboard into a recycling mix, the fresh fibers will enhance the quality of the recycled mass which is there, but to what degree, it depends on what it blends with. When you add plastics into this, it's still an open question for me. I cannot answer black and white on those, because we don't know enough. We know that it's allowed to throw it into the recycling box as long as it doesn't overseas a certain percentage. But whether that is environmental friendly is a big question mark, because now you're already added plastic to a process in which plastic shouldn't be added. So again, we are working as a company to find more to understand more and then communicate clearly. But I cannot answer that today 100% sure of anything. So this, I think, as far as I know, you can recycle it, but whether that is ethically or really environmental friendly is a different question. Whether it's better than many other materials is undoubtable.
Thank you, Einar. Thank you. Max, you have the last word on this.
It's just very quick. I mean, at the end of the day, it also plays into how the recycling works locally, sure. How they manage these things. That's out of our hands. So that's actually a great topic to talk about, but that's for another discussion. So I'm going to keep this really short. Thank you for giving me the last question. Maybe one thing, because the question popped up, sometimes people ask us what software we use. It's really not about the software, but there's a lot of things that you could use to make structures like that. The #1 software on the market for something like that is Rhino with the Grasshopper plugin. But again, there's a lot of solutions. I just wanted to answer that question real quick before I get an email asking about our software. We are using
can you just say that again, just a bit more slowly, Max? What was the name of the software?
Pardon?
What's the name of the software, the #1?
Rhino. It's called Rhino, and it has the Grasshopper plugin, and that's basically it's one slice. It's a very complex software. Again, we're using 5 different types of software depending on what we're trying to do. But that's always my standard go-to answer, because that's like the one all-in-one solution. Just wanted to say that for those who care about that.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so Thank you both for your really interesting answers today. I think it's been a great discussion, and I only wish we had another 3 hours and we could then do the topic full justice. I'd like to thank all of our attendees for your participation today. It's, as ever, we are thrilled that you've come to choose to take some time out to join us. Thank you. We will have our next coffee break on Tuesday, the 2nd of March at 11 a.m. GMT. And that we're going to be joined by Brian Edmondson, who's the founder and creative director of London-based C, who are a design brand agency. And we're going to be looking at the massive range of how a branding agency considers the massive range of opportunities through digitally printed products, and also the challenges that presents in terms of training creatives, because I know that printers are, you know, sometimes we're quite quick to criticize designers for not knowing what files to supply us production, but we're gonna get into that with Brian. So registration link will be sent out shortly. Also, if you're interested in catching up with this or telling a friend about it, it's going to be on YouTube on FESPA TV, so it will be there for time immemorial. And please, if you could complete the survey that we're going to share, it really helps us. We want your feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. It's all useful for us. So I'm now going to share with you the slide again with our contact details, and you can see all our email addresses are there, so you can you know where to grab hold of us. Thank you for your time, and I hope you'll come back for the next session. And gentlemen, it has been an absolute privilege having you here today. Max, I think it's time you probably go and get some sleep. And Einar, like me, you need to carry on with your day.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. It was a great pleasure.